Literally less than 24 hours ago, we were talking about how the Dixie is rising up to over on 100. And then today, on a Saturday, we see the Dixie crash over 2%, a move that we have never seen since 1983. The rise up and the subsequent crash down. Now, we're going to cover all of why this happened today and just how crazy that the move of the dollar that we've been seeing today has been. I mean, look at this big, giant red candle that we've been seeing here. You don't see moves like this where we get the dollar going from over 100 to under 99 that quickly. And you got to ask yourself, is it because the Fed governor has stepped down early? Now, earlier on or later on Friday, Adriana Day Kugler stepped down from her position of the governor reserve board on Friday. Her term was due to expire in January, but her early resignation gives President Trump an opportunity to move more quickly and appoint someone who could eventually replace Jerome Powell as chair. So, with this move, we saw some drastic shifts in what could potentially happen with the interest rate environment. And this is the move that the Dixie made. It's all based on speculation. Markets are 100% forward looking, especially when it comes to the strength of the dollar, the S&P 500, all of these different markets. And it's interesting that we saw such a drastic move here, especially on a Saturday, not so long after we saw that, right? So the dollar index has experienced some major weakness in the first half of this year. It's actually had the worst start to the year and worst since 1973, falling almost 11%. Some reports indicate that it fell over 10% in the first half of 2025. So it reached 3-year lows. But literally the other day, we had the Dixie ripping to highest levels in more than 2 months. And, seeing all of these things, the dollar have its best month since April 2022. So it's interesting that with the dollar, the Dixie ripping literally less than 24 hours ago, that we see this crash so quickly just after it. But let's dive into what we haven't seen. Trump and the dollar were doing something we saw just before the October 1987 stock market crash. Look, that's not clickbait. That's not anything other than just reporting this headline and what we potentially are seeing here. So let's go through this article to see just what Donnie T and the dollar are doing, right? This past week, strong. Its best month since October 2022. It's a far cry from the first half of the year when the index lost almost 11%. But looking back, you might think the weak dollar was good for the stock market, giving the total return of 6.2. But the U.S. stock market has performed spectacularly in years when the dollar was unusually strong. So maybe the dollar's movements don't matter to the dollar-based investors. Or the Fed Reserve lowers interest rates aggressively as Trump administration wants, and the dollar declines sharply as a result, and the stock market could react adversely. So it happened before in 1987. So it's interesting, right? What about the dollar as a leading indicator? Is the dollar trailing or leading, right? Read, a short squeeze is lifting the US dollar versus the euro. Well. You saw it there in this article, not me. The short squeeze, the coveted, the potentially biggest short squeeze in history. Now, I've been screaming from the rooftops that this is a potential for quite some time. I mean, to be honest, we are seeing some of the largest movements that we've ever seen in the Dixie when it comes to, all of these different ups and downs, peaks and valleys. And it's very interesting at the time that we're seeing all of this, that, the dollar is still kind of, remaining under wraps. But something that we are seeing here is that the chance to cut interest rates, You guys know I love to cover this literally every single live stream. The other day, it was at like 35, 40%. Now it's shooting up to 80.3%. So it's more likely than not. I have not seen it at this high since I started covering this and doing live stream with you guys 3, 4 months ago. And it's absolutely skyrocketing up, right? So with that, Trump and the dollar doing something we saw just before the 1987 stock market crash is very interesting, right? So the Fed Reserve wants to lower interest rates aggressively, as the Trump administration wants. The dollar decline will result in a sharp decline. Well, what are we seeing here? The dollar going down on a sharp decline because it's insane, right? This stuff is just absolutely crashing, and we can't really describe it other than, hey, they want to be the dollar as a potentially leading indicator. The 5-year correlation between the dollars and the EPS futures. Well. In the mid 1990s, this did this, but did a declining dollar cause the 1987 stock market crash? There does not appear to be a statistical basis for concluding that a falling dollar will be good or bad for dollar denominated investors, but there is a non-statistical basis for concern, an ominous parallel with the financial environment. On that day, Black Monday, the Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 22.6 in a single session. So this is what we're potentially seeing with the dollar crash and rise up. The volatility that we're seeing is similar to what we saw on Black Monday. Now, that is not, like I said, just me over exaggerating these things. These are some of the potential stuff that we are looking at, and it's incredible the parallels that we're seeing in history. Now, history doesn't always repeat, but it always rhymes, right? So you got to take a close look at what we are seeing here and the potential of this giant crash that it is lining out here. And look, it's not a doomsday scenario, but a plunging US dollar at the time was a major cause of the 1987 crash. So it is possible that in extreme situations, a failing or falling dollar, in fact, should command investors' attention. And then there's always, the ups and downs. Hey, the labor statistics are bad. There's a lot of cracks underneath the surface that I've been covering here for a while on this channel. For those of you guys who are new here and come and watch, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button with the bell notification so you guys know when I'm going live and you can join the chat. I'd love to hear your opinions on this. So let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking, because Trump is saying that, hey, inflation's all done. Everything is looking grand. But the reality of all of this is that there's a lot of signs and weakness in the overall United States economy to this day. And one of them has always been the Dixie. I've been covering it. We saw it shoot up over 100 literally yesterday. And I was going live with you guys yesterday. And then all of a sudden I see this crash here today. And I decided, hey, I need to go live to talk to you guys about how we are seeing the dollar literally go from the best month since April 22 and everything just shoot up to potentially a giant crash. And I think it all reverts back to this decision right here. The Fed governor stepping down early, right? There's going to be rumblings now coming from here saying, hey, you know what? Now the Fed might actually play ball with Trump, and they might want to now look at cutting interest rates and doing it very quickly. And I think that's what investors' biggest fear is, especially with people, getting involved with the dollar and the Dixie. So with this, I think it's very curious that we're seeing, the potential of a crash similar to what we saw on Black Monday. So we're going to have to keep a very close eye on this. And the market, this is obviously after hours here. Saw a little bit of a crash there yesterday. And, down 1.6%, which is a big move for the S&P 500 in a single day. But watching the S&P get close to all-time highs, just under their all-time highs here now, well, you got to keep a close eye on the Dixie because the stock market, and the dollar, sometimes it does well in a weak economy, in a weak dollar economy, even though we think that investors are always going to, hammer it home with all of this. But also, we're looking at the potential of a Black Monday coming up. I'm going to keep this one short, but I wanted to bring this all to you guys. So make sure you're smoking that like Cheech and Chong and hitting the subscribe button for me. Help me get to that 1K subscribers ASAP like Rocky. Tell a friend to tell a friend. And I'll catch you guys all at the next one.